Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Mohammad Ikbal Harb's book, The Birth of a Poet. I like the poetry in this book. The book itself is a unique work. So the poetry itself, we'll start with the poetry. The poetry is gloomy, we'll put it that way. The poetry is somewhat macabre without being, it's not like cosmic horror or Edgar Allan Poe Gothic style, but it is very much depressing. You'll see what I mean in just a second when I start sharing some of these poems with you, but there is this sort of fear and dread that pervades the poems. And I think part of it is linked to Harb being a Lebanese poet who he was born in 1954. So Harb's sort of early adult years, his youth, early adult years would have been shaped, in part at least, by conflicts between the Arab world and Israel. The 6 Days War, the Yom Kippur War, and things like this, for instance, really did a number on Arab nationalism, the Arab psyche, Arab confidence and pride, and things like this. And actually in a lot of the Arab literature from the late 60s into the 70s, after these crushing military defeats, you have this sense of fatalism, this sense of sort of doom and questioning the worth of Arab culture because they had lost these wars. And so I think this is part of what sort of drives Harb in these poems. And I think we can see this in a poem like Deep Down. So this is one. I'll just read it to you, and then we can talk about it. Deep down. Deep down within me, within my humanity, in my remembrance, in my amnesia, I am enveloped in a fear of humiliation, enveloped in human injustice, enveloped in a fear of assassination, of a time that rejoices in my sorrows. Deep down within me, within my humanity, in my remembrance, in my amnesia, I am afraid a savage invader would shake my land, my existence. I am afraid a tyrannical ruler would embrace my brother's assassin. Deep down within me, within my humanity, in my remembrance, in my amnesia, I'm hopeful that my humanity would flee to the mid-sea, but I'm afraid it would be slain by a pirate in mid-sea. Now, I do want to sort of, I had talked about the Arab-Israeli conflicts as sort of shaping Arab mentalities. I want to be cautious about that and maybe slightly walk that claim back because I don't know anything about Harb's politics. I don't know anything about his experiences as an individual. I don't know his personal feelings or connection to any of these things. But for me, reading the work of a Lebanese poet, where he's talking about a fear of humiliation, injustice, fear of assassination, a savage invader that would shake my land, a tyrannical ruler that would embrace my brother's assassin. To me, these things seem potentially, at least, aligned with the Arab perspective on the creation of the State of Israel and then the Arab-Israeli wars, right? This idea of a savage invader. From the Palestinian perspective, from the broader Arab perspective, the State of Israel is a kind of invasion. It is a settler colony. And actually, I think that's an apt description of it from any perspective. The State of Israel is a settler colony in that the majority of Israelis, the majority of the Jews living in Israel, came from elsewhere. Europe and the United States primarily. So by definition, it's a settler colony. How much of an ethical value we attach to that depends, of course, on our perspective on Israel, on Palestine, and on the larger issues involved there. But from a Lebanese perspective, because Lebanon was involved in these conflicts, for me, it makes a lot of sense to read this as a political poem where the fear of humiliation is linked to, again, the Yom Kippur War, the 6 Days War, these military conflicts in which the Arab nations were soundly defeated by Israel in a very, very short amount of time. The reference to human injustice, again, from the Palestinian perspective, from the Arab perspective, Israel's treatment of Palestinians is often characterized by injustice. Fear of assassination, my brother's assassin, this gets mentioned twice. The the Israeli military, Israeli special forces, things like this, are regarded as a violent, sometimes even regarded as a terrorist organization by many people in the Arab world. So we've got these elements of it. But again, it's linked to this sort of existential, almost, fear and trembling, to sort of borrow a phrase from Soren Kierkegaard. This refrain, deep down within me, within my humanity, in my remembrance, in my amnesia. And I think it's sort of pointing to these things being fundamental angst in the poet persona. We get a similar kind of thing, a similar kind of sense of loss and deprivation, again, humiliation on some level, in the poem Funerals. In the funeral of the nation we march, no cheering or calling, Allah is great. At the funeral of mortals we dance, or at the funeral of morals, we dance. At the funeral of honor we enjoy marching. This is the funeral of loyalty. That's the funeral of the conscience, the funeral of the homeland. No cheering or calling, Allah is great. Funerals are crowding each other out. We have no more land for burials, no remains, no grief, no groans, only speeches and a memorial service for a homeland that has decayed and has been crowned with death, with a citizen who's gone, and we go to temples to perform the absentee funeral prayer. So again, that focus on funerals, that focus on the loss of morals, of honor, of the nation, of conscience, the homeland, all of these things, to me, read as a sort of lament for maybe the lost project of Arab nationalism, which had characterized many Middle Eastern countries in the 1950s and into the 1960s, and in a way was kind of destroyed in the 60s with the defeats by Israel. I feel, again, this feels like a sort of lament for lost possibilities. What the Arab world had hoped to achieve, how the Arab world had hoped to see itself, maybe. But again, it's linked to death. It's linked to loss in these ways. And so that's what a lot of Harb's poems deal with here. Now, the other thing I had said is that the book itself is weird. So the poetry is fine. It's good. I like it. This book itself, very, very odd setup. The poetry actually starts on page 21 with the director. The stuff before that is prefatory material. We have title pages and stuff. Obviously, we have a dedication. We have credits. We have a dedication. We have an introduction. We have a foreword. We have a quote. We have a picture of Harb before we actually get to the poetry itself. So there's a lot of introductory material. And the poetry goes from page 21 to page 39. The whole book is 86 pages. And of that 86 pages, less than 20 are devoted to the actual poetry. And it's worth noting, this is a fairly big font. Like those two poems that I read you, Deep Down and Funerals, this is the first page of Deep Down. This is the second page. With a smaller font, a more maybe traditional size font, that would definitely be a one-page poem. After the poems, we have the poems again in Italian, which I guess is a useful resource, but it doesn't make that much sense to me, because if I'm looking for Italian poetry, I'm not picking up a book with an English language title by a Lebanese poet. Now, the reason that there's a section of Italian in here is because Mario Rigli is one of the translators, and he translated it into Italian. I don't know why they felt the need to do that. If I were in charge of this book at whatever level, if I were in charge of the planning, if I were in charge of the publication, I would say, maybe let's have an English language edition, and maybe let's include some more poems if we can, and then let's have an Italian language edition. Let's not stick those in the same book. It just doesn't make that much sense to me. And then at the end, you got a lot of additional subsequent information. You have several pages. So the epilogue goes from 71 to 86. You have 15 pages of epilogue. And that epilogue consists of more information about Harb, contact information for him, a couple more pictures, information about the translator into English over 3 pages, and another quote, 3 pages of information about the translator into Italian. There's so much wasted page space here. This book should have probably been about 30 pages, maybe, realistically. That's what you needed to actually do this. And I'm including in that page count things like the title page, copyright page, dedication page, things like that. 30 pages is really what you would need. This is 86.